And just like that, it is that easy. We're into another interview here on the Long Box Punk. I'm Chris. I'm the punk. He is Damien. Damien, my man, thank you for spending some time with me to talk about comics and life and creation and all of those things. I appreciate you joining me here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Chris. I'm very appreciative that I'm allowed to talk about all of our passions with you. Thank you for having me on, brother.
Awesome. Well, hey, just to let anybody that is watching and or listening to this, I'd love to hear your origin story. So, like, how'd you get into comics? Why are you making comics? Why 2024?
Man, that's a long story. But in a nutshell, my dad. Shout out to my dad. I love my dad very much. He's a nerd, and then that naturally became my thing. He grew up in Akron, Ohio, so he's familiar with all the classic Incredible Hulk, the Mighty Thor. Those are his two favorites.
Okay.
So when him and my mom had me, we had a small comic book shop in South Carolina, and he would read it, and then I would read them, and naturally I started reading comics, and he would bring me to the comic book shop every Friday or every Saturday after school. So I've been reading comics since I could read. Maybe second grade is when I really got into it. Even made my own superheroes. I remember, shout out to Shane Walker. Shane Walker was my best friend. I have no idea what Shane Walker is doing right now. But he was my best friend from like second grade to fourth or fifth grade. And we made comic books. I remember I made one called Panda Man. He wasn't even a man. He was just a straight up anthropomorphic panda with Superman powers. But we made all of that, and then from there, I've just been reading comics all my life. And then, I realized people do this. People make comics for a living. People do this as a passion. So I started looking into it, and a few years ago, maybe like 2017, it was right before I moved to Charlotte. I was looking to get into it, and then I found a subreddit, which is a very helpful subreddit. People who are listening, if you want to get into comics or creating comics, it's how I started. Reddit.com/r/comic book collabs. You'll meet a lot of people there just very passionate people wanting to create. And then Mad Cave, shout out to Mad Cave. They give regular normies like me a shot every year. The Mad Cave Studios talent search, I think it's going on right now.
It is. Yep.
They've been doing it since like 2017, maybe. And I did it the first year, the second year, the third year. I didn't win any of those times, but the fourth time, I was discouraged. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was discouraged. I may have took a year off. I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. But then in 2021, I didn't expect to win. I did my best. And honestly, when I sent it in, Chris, I completely forgot about it. And I was teaching. And then I just checked my email, I think. And then somebody, it was Rachel Disler, who makes comics as well. Very talented. She has a book with a blaze. Rachel Disler emailed me and said, "Congratulations." I said, "Congratulations for what?" And then she just Mad Cave with my name on it. And then I promise you, Chris, I just started crying in front of all my students. And they were like, "Mr. Becton, what's going on?" And I said it to them. But from that Mad Cave win, I just told myself, if this is ever going to happen, then it's going to happen now. So I just decided to go all in. And I've been making a little bit of progress because of people like you, Chris, people giving me a shot, just letting me talk about my passion, all of our passions. But yeah, so from there, it's kind of, hopefully if you cross your fingers hard enough, I'll make a few more moves.
There you go. Well, I've got them crossed. I wish I could work like this for you, and I would just keep them crossed. I think that's great that you grew up in that's the childhood that all of us wish we had. Mm-hmm. Like just being there every week. And it's great though. Like I love that it was through your dad that you had that connection, because my story is very similar, where it was my dad that was bringing me to the comic shops because he was just trying to find something to bond with me over. Uh-huh. And we went to the comic shop, and it just was like, my eyes were just, must have been, I don't actually remember the first trip that we took, but I remember the many trips afterwards, and him picking out books that he thought were appropriate for my age, and then me picking out my first books, and then eventually getting to meet the creators that made those books and like tell them the story of, hey, I'm the collector because of your run on this book. And so it just like being able to have that relational connection, I think is really, really cool. So, and Akron's like right up the road from me.
You're in Ohio.
Yeah. I'm not too far from Akron. So you said that and I was like, wait a second, I know Akron.
Okay. A northerner. You were one of those northerners.
That's
he brought
right,
me down south, man.
So tell me then about the Kickstarter that's going to be launching here in just a couple days. You're right up against it for the Few and Far Between. Tell me about this book.
Yeah.
About the campaign, what you've got planned. How did this come to be?
Yeah, so Far Between is, honestly, it's been in the back of my mind for a long time, because, along with comic books, one of the things that kind of influenced me when I was growing up were video games. One of those video games that I played that I'm actually replaying right now is Final Fantasy. In this case, specifically Final Fantasy 9.
Okay.
But from there, Final Fantasy has always been just a huge influence. You can look at all the comics, almost all the comics that I've made, that I put on Kickstarter. You'll see some influence of Final Fantasy in there, whether it's swords or dragons or magic or sci-fi blending with fantasy. But it's really, I've been pitching it as, this is my Final Fantasy. I'll never be able to make a Final Fantasy game, so I'm going to make my own version of Final Fantasy. And there's a lot of different things. It's Final Fantasy. It's Avatar: The Last Airbender. All these influences that I had growing up. But in a nutshell, the story is a robotic AI horde crash lands on a magical planet called Far Between. I just liked how Far Between sounded as a magical world.
Yeah.
And there's these different nations in there. That's where the Avatar comes in. There's the Mech Nation, who kind of is going away from magic, and they're going more towards machines and things like that. And then you have Reveria, which is still dependent on magic and sorcery and things. And then you have the Animalia Nation, who are beast-like warriors. But they all go against this alien robot AI horde. And then that's kind of like the prologue. And then we flash forward maybe 10, 15 years and we see how all of those nations dealt with that threat, or if they were able to deal with it. But then one of the sorcerers, a young sorceress rather, learns of an evil plot, and only her and one of the prototype robots of the alien horde called Terraframe. The prototype is called Blueprint. She comes across Blueprint, and they learn of this evil plot to take over the entire world. And she and Blueprint are the only ones that can stop it. So they go out on a magical journey, to try to prevent it from happening.
That's awesome. I love that the idea of having different tribes gives you so much like creative freedom if you wanted to play around with. I mean, it seems like you could really create an entire line of books that all are about different elements of each of those tribes.
Yeah, and that was. Oh, I'm sorry for cutting you off, Chris.
No, you're good.
But that was really one of the fun parts of creating Far Between. Is just, I was able to collaborate with people, or the artist Rosario Mendez. Shout out to Rosario Mendez, who's a true collaborator, because it's not just all of my ideas, but Rosario is able to give me that input, and we're building a world, and we're able to. That's really something that I haven't done with comics so far, but this entire world, how do they interact with each other? Have they had previous conflicts? It's just really fun coming up with those different things, those different strings to tie together.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your see, this is the beauty of just like riffing. What's your relationship like with Rosario? Like how did you connect? How like what's the creative process look like for the two of you?
You know, I honestly, when I discovered her, and I went and discovered, kind of sounds like, you know, she wasn't doing her own thing before, but I just happened to come across Rosario's Instagram page, and I really liked her artwork. It was more of a, it was really kind of like a cartoon style, more with influences of anime, not quite anime, kind of like Avatar, and that's what I was really going for. And a lot of her artwork was very, quote, medieval, very fantastical, things like that. So she had her email in her bio. I reached out to her, and she told me, you know, I don't have any real experience with comic books, and I said, don't worry about it. Here's a template for a page.
Yeah.
And just looking at your work, I think you'll do great. And just getting the artwork back from her, it has been, you know, even better than I imagined. But honestly, when I write scripts, I just, you know, I kind of give them direction. I try not to just say it needs to be this way, this way, this way, or this way. Yeah. I said, in a script, I might say, Jayada, who's the main character, Jayada hits Blueprint with an ice blast. And then she'll say, is that it? I was like, well, Rosario, I believe in your artwork. Go ahead and, you know, go creative, be creative, go all out. Whatever you imagine, that's what I want you to do, because I don't want to restrict any of my collaborators. And then she'll come back to me with ideas. She said, and she'll tell me like, hey, I was thinking about doing this instead. And I say, that's better than my initial idea. Go for it. We're kind of like back and forth like that. And it's been a really great experience.
That's cool. Now, is that all like via some sort of like text or email or that sort of thing?
In the past, I've gone on calls with some artists. Rosario, it's so far it's just been emails. But like I said, I've worked with such a talented artist named Kenneth Laster on a horror comic that we did last year called Try Not to Die. We've gotten on several calls, and he'll just pitch me ideas. Instead of doing this, I like your idea, Damien, but instead of doing that, that's my idea. And I said, you know what, Kenneth, that's way better than what I thought too. So go for it. But you know, that's something that I learned as well. If they're going to be true collaborators, then, you know, you're going to have to be willing to, you know, be open to their ideas, because a lot of times they have most of the time, you know, because they have the brain for that. They have if I can draw, I would draw my own comics. But a lot of times the artists have the brain, they have the ability to make it even better than what the writer can imagine.
Yeah, that's a very common thing that has come up with a lot of collaborators that I've talked to. Of, you know, I had this one thing, and then I let the artist know, and then they sent back something totally different. I was just like, that's so much better.
Yep. And I'm thankful for it. All of the collaborators that I've worked with have been great. So I've been extremely lucky.
That's cool. Yeah, because this isn't in doing research for the show, because I'm this isn't your first Kickstarter. Right. So I saw like you had The World's Away, you had Sinner Takes All. So how does this campaign, like I'm assuming you've learned something every time as you've gone forward. So like what's new, or what new approach are you bringing to this campaign that you might not have known or had on previous campaigns?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. You know, in Worlds Away, well, my first Kickstarter was maybe in 2018. It was for a comic that I never was able to make. It was unsuccessful. It was called Imaginary, it's still in the back of my mind. Hopefully that comes to fruition one day. Yeah. But I took a break from that, and then in 2021 or 2022, I did Worlds Away #1, the Kickstarter, and that far and away has been my most successful Kickstarter.
Mm.
It had 299 backers,
Wow.
and I was not able to recapture any of that in the following ones. So one of the things that I've learned, and that I'm continuing to learn, is that I have to. Well, me specifically, some people, every situation is different, but me specifically, one of the things that I'm doing differently is kind of trying to strike while the iron's hot. And not everyone's able to do that financially as well. I'm in a lucky spot to, have a little bit of money to spend on the front end and hopefully get that money back.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm doing differently is trying to put more stuff out. So when I did Worlds Away #1, I took a couple months off before I did Worlds Away #2, and not as many people came back for it. And then that was the same thing for the next one, and the same thing for the next one. But that's one thing that I have been doing different. But also, I've been trying to flesh out more of the world that I'm trying to build as well. Going into Farbetween has been really, really, really fun. But just being in constant communication with the Rosario specifically, and just trying to flesh out the world, make it believable, is what I try to tell her. We want these characters, this world, to be believable. It's not just fight after fight after fight. We want people to care about these people.
Yeah, that's cool, because when you develop those like emotional connections with the character, then that gives an even higher level of investment from your readers.
Yeah.
So that's a smart, like, because I love a good battle scene and a fight scene, but if that's all the comic is just fight after fight after fight, it almost gets to be like it loses the impact of that battle scene.
Right.
If it's just one battle after another. So I think that's some good learning there. I did notice as I was looking at the pre-launch page, which is linked in the video description. So anybody that wants to get in on that, just click the link in the description. But you've got some really freaking cool rewards lined up. Specifically, like that Game Boy cartridge is clutch. I was just like, I've never seen that as like a reward before. And so I knew that we would probably end up talking about video games.
I'm glad. Chris, I forgot all about that. Thank you for bringing it up. But yeah, so one of the things that one of the rewards is going to be part of I call it the retro gaming collector reward, and it's really, if you take a look at it, it's literally going to be a ruby red replica Game Boy cartridge with a Farbetween sticker on it, and it's really just a shout out to what I talked about earlier, because I was so influenced by Final Fantasy. I was so influenced by Zelda, the world of The Legend of Zelda, Drakengard, things like that. All those JRPGs from back in the day. It's been a huge influence on my life, on my comics, on my storytelling. They still make Final Fantasy VII remakes. They do remakes and Rebirth, and I'm a part of that generation. So that reward specifically, and the variant cover of the JRPG, the turn-based system by Colt. Yeah. Shout out to Colton Mastic, who was able to do that cover. It's really just a love letter to Final Fantasy, to JRPGs from back in the day. But yeah, I'm really, thank you. Like I said, thank you for telling me about that. I'm all about that.
Yeah, because like both the cartridge and the cover, I was like, so I was more of a Sega person growing up. Okay. So I had the Genesis, and I remember just hours and hours of grinding away at Phantasy Star 2 and not getting anywhere, and like getting lost in it's the hardest. I've never beaten it, because every time I get to the same area, I'm like, I'm done. I can't figure it out. Whatever. But seeing the cover that fits with it, with the like the very RPG, like choose your enemy and then what are you gonna do? I was just like, dude, that's such a cool. So I was gonna ask, like, is the story itself does it read as if it's like a comic book or like a video game where
Mhm.
it has, similar like mechanics, or is that more of like a nod to your influences? It seems like it's more of the latter.
Yeah.
But I was curious to like hear you talk about just how like where else have you woven in some of the video game elements into the book, if they're in there.
Yeah. It's kind of a combination of both. It'll read like a traditional comic book, with the dialogue, with the word balloons and things like that. But the trade dress or the design of the book, the idea about that, and you'll see on issue 1, where the intro page, I haven't made it yet, but I have the idea of at the beginning, it'll be like a start screen. So it'll be it'll say new game, load game. And then the button will be on the new game part. And then every issue after that will be continue, or it'll be on load game.
That's awesome.
And then everything like all the designs are going to be very influenced by Final Fantasy, by Legend of Zelda, things like that. But yeah, but you know, I've been playing Final Fantasy 9s recently, and it's just a nostalgia trip.
Yeah.
Going back to it. It's really fun. Even just going back to, like you were saying, even some Sega games. I didn't have a Sega, but I had a friend who had it. When I think about that, it wasn't. I think it was like, that was Sonic. I'm thinking Earthworm Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never played Earthworm Jim, but I remember, shout out to Robert Cannon. I don't know what Robert Canning's doing right now, but he had a Sega, and he was playing. And I remember Earthworm Jim. But it's just a love letter to all those things.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's fun to think about. It's fun to come up with these different ideas and put it. And hopefully, people like you guys, like you, Chris, will enjoy just a little shout outs in the book.
Yeah, because I mean, anytime reading any book that has hidden Easter eggs, whether it's video game references or movie posters that are like slightly showing because copyright and stuff, but I live for those Easter eggs. So even watching any of the Marvel movies, or the DC movies that have like deep cut random throwaway things that nobody else pays attention to.
Yeah.
Those are the things that for me, I'm like, I can't believe they just did that.
Well, let me ask you this then. How did you, I'm assuming that you watched Deadpool and Wolverine?
I did. I was there. My local theater had like a fan event on Thursday afternoon.
The Thursday it opened?
Yeah. Yeah, so my wife and I took half days from work and went to the show, and it was like, so I don't know if you can tell, Wolverine and the X-Men were my jam growing up, and that was always like the bonding thing with my dad because he always loved the X-Men as well. And I've talked about it before, but like when I met Stan Lee and I had this whole presentation and 30-second speech that I was going to give him about what the X-Men meant to me, and I got in front of him and all I blurted out was, "Thank you for the X-Men." But like he stopped what he was doing and was like, "Well, I wrote them just for you." And I was like, "Oh my God, you did?" And like his handlers started laughing and ushering me out of the line. But I'm taking it to my grave. But yeah, so I, as a fan and as somebody that, watched all of the Fox movies and has seen all of the, like I've seen all of them. It was everything I wanted it to be, and then some.
Right.
I've seen some of the discourse of like, there's no character development. And it's like, you don't need it. Like, this is the third Deadpool movie. This is the 24th year that Hugh Jackman is playing Wolverine.
Yep.
Like, what do you mean there's no kid? And so, I mean, the way that they brought Wolverine and Deadpool into the MCU and merged the Fox universe with the Marvel universe, and even did a really good job of sending off and like putting a nice bow on the Fox universe. I just like, it was, for me, it was the end game to Marvel fans for X-Men and Fox movie fans.
Yeah. And I feel the same way. I
great.
absolutely loved it. It was, there was so many things that I didn't catch that I saw after I watched that people were posting online. I'm like, I didn't even know that. But you're in my opinion, you're right, because just being able, having it make sense,
Yeah.
putting all these characters together, putting, spoiler alert, people who have not seen it, getting Blade in there, getting Chris Evans, and as soon I intentionally went in there without any spoilers, and when I saw Chris Evans, I was like, "There's no way that's Captain America, Chris Evans." I know what they're doing here, but it was just it was so fun, and I'm excited. Some people are mixed on RDJ coming back as Doom, which is fair enough. But I'm one of those people. I'm like, yeah, man, bring it on.
Yeah,
I'm excited for Doomsday and Secret Wars too.
Yeah. I was sitting on my couch just like refreshing Twitter the night of the Hall H announcements.
Me too.
That's how I experience it, because I don't have that kind of money. When I saw the video of him walking forward and taking off the mask, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I had the visceral, my gut reaction was no. No, I've been waiting for Doom. The running joke is every Doom we've had in every Fox movie was just a Doom bot. They're all just, none of them are the real Doom because they weren't done how Doom should be done. And so I've had really high hopes for how the MCU introduces Doom, and then for it to come out and just announce immediately, yeah, it's RDJ. I was just like, but why? And so I slept on it eventually, because I don't want to, post just stupid, because all we got was a title, right? I'm still on the X-Men, Avengers Doomsday, period. We don't know how that's going to come to be. We don't know how they're going to build it up, we don't know anything other than that. And RDJ is Dr. Doom. I'm not entirely convinced that he's the real Doctor.
I don't think he's Victor Von Doom either.
I don't think we're gonna see Vic until Secret Wars, and I think he's gonna come from another universe and just go away. That's what I think is gonna happen. Because
I was gonna say, I think we're gonna get this initial Doom, and then I think going forward we're gonna get a MCU Doom, a Fantastic Four Doom. But I mean, I understood the reaction, because it felt like for a lot of people it just felt like a safe pick. Marvel has been on the on the downside for the past few movies. For the most part, I've been enjoying them, but
I think they're great. Yeah, you're about to get me on a soapbox, Damien. We're going to start fighting, because I don't think the Marvel MCU ever left. And part of the reason why, I'm a fanboy, and I will always be a fanboy, and that's fine. But also, I heard an interview with Charles Soule, and he was talking about a novel that he had written, but he also has done work for Marvel and other comics and all that stuff. And one of the things that he said in that, I just it's become my life mantra, and that's not everything is for everyone. And what Marvel as a studio has to do is they can't always target mouth breathers like me. They have to branch out, right? They have to find new audiences. So how are they going to do that? They're going to draw in more of the younger crowd with a fresh, energetic Ms. Marvel. And I loved that show because it was so much fun. It just visually, and the production and the animations that they had, and her energy on camera and in the Marvels, it carried over. All of that was so well done to me. And I'm not the target audience, and I know that. So it's not my favorite Marvel project, but I didn't hate it. She-Hulk was the same way. She broke the fourth wall. Have you read the comics? Yeah. She was the first Marvel character to break the fourth wall. So it was I just the weird Jared is I don't understand because like they're movies about superheroes. Like, let's just
Yeah.
enjoy the superhero. Did the
So
bad guy get punched? He
me
did.
and you are on the same page. Because I've been enjoying them.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of them. I'm not gonna lie. There's been a lot that I haven't even finished What If yet. I haven't
Okay.
finished What If season 2.
We haven't either. So maybe that's the awful thing that ruins Marvel. But
But for the most part, I've been a huge fan, and it might be the fanboy in me. But hold on, hey buddy. But I'm with you. I don't think it's been as good as phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. I agree with that. But I've been consistently enjoying what they've been putting out.
Yeah, and I also, for what it's worth, just want to snub all of the critics because they're expecting like Oscar worthy movies and all of this stuff, and it's like, no, we know what we're getting. Like, I'm here to see superheroes punch supervillains in the face. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
If I get that, I'm gonna be happy. But yeah, no, like not every movie can be Endgame.
Yeah.
So like, same thing with, I'm a big pro wrestling fan, and see, now you've got me on this weird tangent. As a pro wrestling fan, like, I'm enjoying the current product, and everybody that's like, oh, it's not the Attitude Era, it needs to go back to the Attitude Era. I'm like, it really doesn't. I lived through that too, and it really wasn't that great.
The Attitude Era, that's like Stone Cold, Undertaker, The Rock.
Yeah, exactly. That's to like 2006, 2005, after the Monday Night Wars kind of fell off and WCW crumbled because Vince Russo is terrible, and all of So like, we got the high points, right? Like, we got Stone Cold and we got The Rock and some crazy performances from Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, but like, we also had like just rum-dums and like Snitsky, who punted a baby into the audience. Like, that was the Attitude Era. So it's not like, even with wrestling, we had the Endgame and Infinity War, and everybody wants to think that everything was like that. And it's like, it wasn't. And it's the same thing with the Marvel movies. They weren't all that caliber. Yeah. Those two were.
Yeah.
So like, do new things. Be a studio that's willing to take risks and
that's what they've been doing.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. Now you got my mind on, and we're not even talking about my comic right now. Have you read? You're a wrestling fan. Have you read Do a Powerbomb?
It's in my pile. I haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay, do me a favor and do yourself a favor. That was literally, it's, not counting superhero books, but even counting superhero books, that might be my top 3 favorite comics that I've ever read. Shout out to Daniel Warren Johnson, who is an extremely talented artist and writer. It was such a good book. That was one of the ones that I could not wait to read, and I have it all 7 issues or 8 issues, and then I went back and bought the hardcover, just because it was that good. I should have brought it to Heroes Con to get it signed by Daniel Warren Johnson, but do yourself a favor, please, Chris. Read that book. Great. And then get a tattoo of it because it's incredible.
Yeah, I did just finish, because I got that and I got Ultra Mega, the trades at the same time.
Okay.
And so I just finished Ultra Mega like last week. And so that I've got like 2 books in front of it, and then I have a super complicated shelf of like what I have to read, and then random things that people are sending me to read. It's crazy. But you have a book. See how we're doing this? We're just forcing it back into. So you mentioned the possibility of or the intentionality of world building and creating all of this space. So does that also mean that you're working on like a shared universe, that you're going to release more titles, or are they going to be the same title, just continuing on with this story that you're creating in this first issue?
Yeah. That would be a dream come true if I could. I have the first arc, which is planned for 4 issues. And if there's a great response to it, and I'm hoping there is, because I'm very passionate about Far Between. Hopefully, if people respond to it well, if they want more, if I'm able to capture that fire, that lightning in a bottle with this, then yes, I would absolutely, because there's so many different things that I would like to do. There's so many different tribes, there's so many different nations that I would like to explore that I won't just be able to do in 4 issues, that I won't just be able to do in one arc. But yes, to answer your question, that's the plan. But a lot of dominoes have to fall in place first. And that's why I'm asking you guys to if you're into Avatar: The Last Airbender, if you're into fantasy comics, Final Fantasy, video games, things like that, to consider checking us out, because it is I'm planning on making a huge world that everyone would love.
That's cool. And I'm gonna cheat and look, because you have something on the pre-launch page where shipment is expected in October.
Yes.
And you're launching like in that's it. How are you doing a turnaround that fast? Is the book like already complete and ready to ship off?
We have 5 pages finished.
Okay.
And once upon a successful campaign, Rosario, she works really fast and she works really well. So fingers crossed. And, that's the best case scenario. I'm not going to lie. That's the best case scenario. That's what's expected. But if we can get this done in from August to September, and then Rosario will be able to work on it throughout there. And then we'll get it out at the end of October. And hopefully we can start another campaign. If, like I said, if the reception is good, hopefully we can just keep the momentum going and go on to the next one and on to the next one and continue building that world.
That's cool. I love the long-term. When you write stories, do you write all of them with like the big, like, this is my overarching thing that I want to tell, but let me first tell this thing? Like, is that how you've always approached writing?
Yeah, I do have big ideas for just about all of my comics. Big ideas, but I try to rein that in a little bit and just try to tell a complete story the first time, the first arc, and I want it to be a complete story. Like, so really, Far Between number 1 and 1 through 4, possibly 1 through 5. It's really about Jayada, the sorceress, a young sorceress. It's really a story about her and Blueprint learning to trust each other. This alien robot horde crash lands on Far Between on her planet and caused a lot of havoc, killed a lot of people, caused her a lot of grief. So when she stumbles upon Blueprint, she automatically assumes that he's an evil robot. But to her surprise, no, he wants to help her. So the entire story is her learning, hey, he's not really out to get me. I'm going to have to let down some of my guard. I'm going to have to let down some of these walls so that we can accomplish this mission, which is saving the world. But she won't be able to do that unless she's willing to trust him. And hopefully, if I write the issues really well, if I do my job well, she'll have to make a hard decision, a believable decision.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. I like that the tension, because like there's always trust issues between anybody, and a lot of times, like, not to get too real, but like in society, there's tension when it's like, well, you don't look like me, so like, are you okay? So are there societal things that are influencing like how you wrote this story, or was that more of like I just want to write a story that involves trust and relationships and also saving the world, and they just need to be different for different reasons?
I think that comes naturally. People, in my opinion, are inherently, I wouldn't say distrustful, but people are, especially nowadays, they're kind of hesitant. I will say hesitant.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from just society, whether it's wrong, whether it's right. Most of the time, it's wrong. But it's really a story that comes from my experiences, my students' experiences, what I see on the news. I didn't really go out intentionally writing a story about, this is political or societal commentary on the world today.
Yeah.
But I think it's natural when you see those parallels in this story and in society, because that's what people go through. That's what I've been through, and that's what everyone, intentionally or unintentionally, might have experienced.
Yeah. Cool. Great. I have you, because you're a teacher, or have been a teacher, is it like, as you're writing these, is the fact that some of your like current or former students could pick up a book that you wrote, like, does that hang out in the back of your brain anywhere?
Yeah. So I've written some comics that aren't middle school appropriate. Last year I wrote Try Not to Die, which is a horror comic. Lots of blood and gore and things like that.
Yeah.
And Farbetween, I intentionally wanted to write this one as a middle grades kind of young adult kind of story, so that I can put it in my school library if somebody wanted to, if a kid wanted to, if a sixth grader and an 11-year-old wanted to read it.
Yeah.
And it's had so many influences like Avatar, which is, Nickelodeon, that's 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old. But things like Pixar movies, those are a huge influence on some of the stories that I tell too, just the lessons that it won't be as explicit, I think, as some of Pixar movies or Disney movies. The lessons that some of these characters learn, I might not be explicitly told to them like that.
Yeah.
But they've been a huge influence on some of the stories, specifically this one, Farbetween, that I wanted to write as well.
That's cool. Yeah, and you're not the first creator that I've talked to that has made that, like, has played in those different sandboxes of like, this is purely for adults because there's no way, and then like, this is a really fun story and like anybody can enjoy it. And I think the sweet spot is finding like it's for anybody, and also like anybody of different ages is gonna find something that is entertaining, because I'm a giant kid, and my driver's license says that I'm an adult. However, I still I love magic and fantasy and all, like video games, and all of that stuff is just like right in my wheelhouse. So we talked about like the influence of video games, and being on the Long Box Punk, we got to talk about music. So does music does that play into your creative process at all? Does it, do you find inspiration or influence from the music that you're listening to?
Yeah. I actually, hopefully I'll be on in a month or two as well, Chris, because I do have another one coming out. That's hugely influenced by some music that I've, especially growing up as a kid. But there's a lot of music that I've grown up with that influences my storytelling. In this case, I'm going back to video games. Nobuo Uematsu is the composer for the original Final Fantasy games. And you can ask my girlfriend who's up there. We were in the car when we went to go get lunch today. We were playing music from Final Fantasy 9. And it just put me, when I'm writing a script, a lot of times that's what I hear. I'll hear the battle theme from Final Fantasy 7. That's the boss battle theme from Resident Evil, or things like that.
Yeah.
But there's been, I grew up listening to hip hop, and in a future story, hopefully very soon, Chris, like in a few weeks, kind of soon, you'll see another story that's been hugely influenced by hip hop and the hip hop community, which also has influences of Final Fantasy as well. So that's a cool story that I got coming out too. But yeah, to answer your question, yes.
Great. I love when one of the first interviews I did with Jay Donahue about his book Together Forever, which is a horror story. I was asking him the same thing, like, so how do you when you're writing? And he was like, I listen to horror movie soundtracks. Yeah, just like it puts me into. And so I've tried it since then of like, if I'm going to sit at my local coffee shop and just try and plunk away at getting ideas that I have out on a paper, it's like, okay, well, if this is sci-fi, I'll listen to like synthwave, like dark space techno type stuff. And listening to it, it really does. Like once I start, then I feel like I'm in the world that I'm trying to create, and I can hear the music as like, you know, the soundscape on the spaceship or whatever. And it's been fascinating for me to see that play out in like real time, because I'm like, oh, like cool, so you're kind of psychotic, I got it. But then I tried it and I was like, oh, like
it works. Yeah,
no, that's real. And it blows my mind how music just unlocks so many things. Like I was a theater major for a bit in college. I had 9 different majors. Theater was one of them. But I did a lot of like music stuff too. And I've never been coordinated enough to do or create music, but I have friends that are very talented, and they were taking like psychology of music and like what it does in studies with people with Alzheimer's, and how if you relate music with Alzheimer's patients, it suddenly it unlocks their brain, and suddenly they can like remember things that they haven't been able to remember without that music playing. And just there's like I have ADHD, so I get on like obsessive compulsive just tunnels of like, I need to know everything about this. And the impact of music on the human brain is just so freaking fascinating to me. So,
it is. It's especially with the creative process. That's something, I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because that's something that I would, again, I don't claim to be superstar writer of writers or the next upcoming whatever. But if you're having kind of like a block or something, one thing that I would suggest is, putting on some headphones or some earbuds, and, if whatever mood or tone you're looking for, throw some music on, and and start from there. That's absolutely something that I would recommend.
That's cool. Do you have any other like just learnings that you would recommend to somebody trying to figure it out?
Yeah. And again, I said this earlier, not everyone has the same situations. So if you're able to, and you want to, give it a shot. I know that sounds cliche. I know that sounds corny. But I haven't made it far. I'm going to knock on wood, but I wouldn't have made it as far as I am if I just didn't just say, F it, and let's give this a shot and see what sticks. Because if I didn't, when I did Mad Cave, I was like, man, I'll give it a shot. I didn't expect anything, but then from there, that gave me the confidence to go forward with this. So learn from, ask questions, learn from different people and ask questions. One thing about the indie community, from my experiences, that the indie comics community specifically, just about everyone that I've come across, especially people like you, Chris, where they all just want to help. I mean, we're inherently, the writers and artists, they're inherently competing with each other, quote, competing with each other. But everyone's rooting for each other too. So if you have questions, reach out to somebody, reach out to me. I'll answer your question as best as I can, because a lot of people in the indie comics community and just in comics in general just want to help, want to see other people do well.
That's cool. I have had a very similar experience of just like, it's insane. I mean, even with like the podcasting community, there's shows that I've gotten to talk to just even through like Threads or Instagram. And then like that suddenly is, every time I post a link to a new interview or my Substack or whatever, like I see the same names start, and it's other podcasts that are like, hey, you should check this out. Like, and I see a lot on Twitter. I don't know how it took me 14 years or whatever to find this corner of Twitter that is full of the indie comics people that are just like, there's 7 or 8 accounts that I follow that do nothing but like, hey, Signal Boost Tuesday, or, like, make my book real Monday, like, whatever. And they're just constantly, giving a space for creators to share. And then they're signal boosting every single reply. And I just like the community aspect of it, of, God, who said that? Dan Slott on Threads was like, as a creator and as a writer, he said, I'm not trying to take somebody else's job. I'm trying to make someone else's job better and get them the visibility that I have. Because like I always use the analogy that's super cliche, it feels like, because I say it all the time, but like if my boat's rising, it's not because my boat's floating, it's because the water's rising. So like everybody else's boat around me is also then benefiting. And I just think that the support and, keeping things as supportive and helpful and beneficial and all of those things, like it's just a sweet, sweet thing that the indie comics community has created and continues to work on and create and build and foster and do all of those things. So
you're a part of that, man.
It's wild.
You specifically, because when it happened a couple weeks ago, if you're listening, I just posted I just tweeted, hey, does anyone have any upcoming whatevers for interviews? And shout out to Chris. He just reached out to me, said, hey, here's my email. If possible, let's set something up. And as soon as I saw it, I immediately emailed him. And then we were able to connect from there. And this back and forth we had, we wouldn't have had this if people like you, Chris, weren't, just trying to help people like me out. So thank you. I appreciate you, man.
Well, you are welcome, but I can't take credit. I got to give it to my man, Jolly Green, because he sent me your post, as he regularly does. I don't know how he's got the pulse on all of the people, but like there are probably 7 or 8 people at this point that he sent me a post of, and I did exactly what I did with you. Like, hey, indie guy, I'm an indie. Like, let's talk. Let's be on and signal boost and have a good time and talk about all of the things that are everything and everywhere all the time. And so let's just have a good time. So that that's the end of my notes. You kind of already beat me to giving your manifesto, but at the end of my notes and my questions, I always like to turn things over. I shut up and I listen. And so if you have anything in your head, in your heart that you just want people to know or hear, this is a safe space. And so I just open the floor up to you to share what you've got for anybody. It could be about your book. It could be about cars or whatever. Sure. This is just your time. So I'll stop talking and I'll listen to what you got, Damien.
Yeah. And I would just like to, reiterate that, because comic books is such a niche thing. And, if you are passionate about it, if this was something that you wanted to do, like I did, we were talking about it earlier. I made Panda Man comics in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. I made Cybear Man comics at the same time. So if you want to make this happen, I would just say, again, I would say, give it a shot. It doesn't have to be a 28-page comic. It could be a 6-page short. It could be you looking up an anthology, an open anthology that's taking submissions. And don't get discouraged when you get a declined email. because that will happen, and it will happen over and over and over again, and it sucks. And you'll try to take it personally, but it's more often than not, 99% chance none of it is personal. They just liked somebody else's work more than yours, and that's fine as well. We've all been through it. Your favorite writer, I'm sure Daniel Warren Johnson, has got a declined email at one point in his life. So if this is something that you want to do, start off small, build from there. 4-page comic, 6-page comic, 8-page comic, and then ask questions, learn from creators, and give it a shot. Also, go to farbetweencomic.com. Go to farbetweencomic.com. My pre-launch page is up. We're planning on launching in August 13th. And we need as many pre-launch followers as we can get. And we hope to see you out there. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you. Thank you, Chris, as well.
Absolutely. And to your point, Jim Lee, like the big guy at DC, just shared on his Instagram a rejection letter that he got from DC, from their head back in like the 80s, I think.
Now he's running DC.
And now he's the one that's, running the whole dang show. So, I love when artists and creatives can be open about their process like that. So thank you for sharing what you've been through, your experience, your learnings. And I look forward to a fully funded campaign, which hopefully happens quickly for your anxiety's sake, because I know that those can be just a bear. So where can people find you on social media? And then I'll make sure that everything is in the description so that it's easy for them to find you.
Sure. On Twitter, and I'm not calling it X. I still call it Twitter. Twitter, you can find me at Damien Becton. On Instagram, it is at Becton. On Threads, it is at Becton. But yeah, I'm active on all three of those. Farbetweencomic.com. You can find it'll take you straight to the Kickstarter page. We hope to see you there.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I will make sure that all of those are in the description so that if you are listening or watching this, you can just tap expand description, and then you don't even have to type. You just tap the thing and it'll take you, and you can keep up with Damien and all of the cool work that he's doing and all the comics that he's putting out, especially the Few and Far Between #1 coming to Kickstarter August 13th. Well, that's going to be it for this interview. We made it through another one. And what's a good podcast without a good tagline? So because this is the end, punks, I'm going to tell you to do what's good for you and go read some indie comics. Until next time, we're out of here.